Alright, back again for episode 14 of Behind the Sessions. Before we get started into the actual points I want to touch upon today, you might notice if you've already listened to the actual Wollen Retold episode 14, one more time, because I keep saying this every single time I do this, but if you haven't watched Wollen Retold, corresponding episode to this one, go do that first, because why would you be here otherwise? This is just behind the scenes. But anyway, that being said, you will notice if you listen to the first opening minute, the sort of the cold open leading up to my actual sort of intro sequence, that I think it's probably fair to say, I believe, but this would be the most sort of energetic and over the top and sort of playful I have been with my cold opens, which I try to be in general anyway. But the reason why this one in particular, I was particularly, I don't know, what's the word, I guess zany, in this one, ultimately comes down to the fact that you may have noticed, and if you have, damn, because I don't want you to, but just to say it so it's out there, I think from episode 12, I believe episode 12, all the way from episode 13, 14, 15, the finale, and then 16 for the epilogue, I sat down when I finally had the chance to do so, trying to get a little bit ahead, give myself some more free time, because a lot of the stuff that I do takes up a lot of my time, to be honest. Which, you know, it happens. And I recall sitting down and at a certain point goes, right, I have time. This week's going to be like a little bit more light and breezy for me than most of them have been this year. I'm just going to sit down and record at least one every day until I recorded basically all the things well in advance. I was already written all the scripts and got caught up on all those. Turns out, this should not be a surprise to you, but I'm stupid, so I had to learn this the hard way. Trying to record, like potentially like 2.5 hours of recording, doing every line with several takes and going through, make sure you're getting every single thing, trying different stuff. And doing that with your voice and my sort of like homemade voice booth in my closet next to me where I'm sitting at my computer. It not feasible to do that every day back to back and still have a voice that's going to sound not worn down enough to exist for a long time. So I didn't do that, but every second day I'd have, do like episode 12, record the whole thing, have the raw audio done, after a few hours of doing so, then have a day break. And by break, I mean do other work that wasn't using my voice. And then I can't wait. In case it's not coming through, I cannot wait for the chance to play a video game again, basically is what I'm saying. I want my free time back. Anyway, before I break down and cry about it, God, me complaining. There are new parents out there that are suffering far worse than I am, don't you worry. I really shouldn't be complaining. Now that said, it does get to the point where I would have that day break, come back, do the next recording, and then essentially in 1 week I had done all of the recording finish ages in advance, so I could then just getting other stuff worked out and make my timeline a little bit less hectic. And it was very, very nice. It was a huge weight off my shoulders to be able to finally do that. Unfortunately, and yes, in advance, it does make me want to bang my head against the wall every time I hear it. I don't know what I did. It's fool that I am, and I was only filled with regret. When I set up the mic in my closet again for episode 12, knowing I was going to do it for all week, I left it exactly where it was, and I didn't move it after I finished. I didn't move it back to like the angle it's at now on the other side of my room, pointed towards me so I can speak to you. No, I just left it where it was, and unfortunately, you can hear the pain in my voice. I left it at episode 12. I left it too close to where my mouth and my head is when I speak into it. So, even though it has this wonderful, nice new, what's it called? The squishy thing on the mic that I'm gesturing to, but you guys can't see because this is audio only. Sorry, I'm completely. I can't do P, the pop filter, that thing. So when I make P sound from my mouth, that's a strange sentence, the ear will hit the mic and cause a whole nasty noise, and this thing that covers it, which I just can't remember the name for. I've talked about it before ages ago. I think I got it around the 6th, 5th episode. I brought one, and that was nice, along with like the stand for it as well, for the mic. And it's been doing me great. It's been doing a fantastic job. There's been no big bump into the mic whenever I say like Perry the platypus. Just to give you an example, I'm sure Matt did it right now a few times with every P word. And I just stood too close to the mic. So I recorded that and was unaware, because I was not listening to the playback audio. And again, I know it sounds stupid in hindsight, right? Every single time you see anyone in a voice booth that always put headphones on, I have been able to get away with not having to do that. I prefer not to put the mics on. When I can help it, I genuinely just try to avoid using my headphones that often. And look at me now. Look at what I have done to myself. In doing that and making that foolish choice, because I did 12. It was bad. Most of it was fine, of course. I'm exaggerating, but obviously it really, really bothers me, and I hate drawing your attention to it, but I'm just, venting this out, that I did the P sound, and it was a problem. And then, because I didn't move the mic, and I didn't want to listen back to all the things we just spent 2 hours doing, and I was just like, no, I'll just get through all of them, and when I've finished the entire week's worth, you can see how bad this is going. You can see exactly where this is going to go. Then afterwards, I would sit down and then spend the next couple of weeks, which I did, going through and meticulously editing every single line, finding the best take of all, and then compiling and put them into a long bracket, which made like hundreds of like small little cubes of voice things all connected by the end, which I have to do anyway. But man. The one time, I'm like, right, I'm going to go ahead and just record all these things back to back and just get myself ahead of schedule, do myself a favour for my future self. That is the one time that I set up the mic poorly. I didn't realise at the time. In hindsight, very poorly set up, so I was too close to it, which means for the rest of the recording, all the way through the finale and even the epilogue, I'm so sorry. That P sound is not going away. I should not have, in hindsight, I should not have started this episode talking about this, because you can already hear how deflated and defeated I feel about acknowledging this. It's just reminding me, just the pain. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that. It all comes back around. Excuse me, sorry. My body is trying to implode and die now, because it is remembering the misery that I have wrought upon myself. I'm so melodramatic, I apologise. But you notice that in episode 14, I was all up-de-da, and the huge episode morning, I was being really, really funny and lively and over the top. And that was because I had, like I said, been recording a couple of these things back to back. This was like 6 days in. It was my third recording I was doing, and this was getting very repetitive and boring and taking up a lot of my time. Boring is horrible. I like doing this stuff, but I like it all coming together. The recording hours and hours standing up and getting sore feet in one spot, recording to my probably unfortunately dusty closet. That's not the fun part that I look forward to. It's the part of the job that makes the actual fun part all come together. So do it. I don't mean to sound like I'm complaining too much about it, but by that point, I was actually having fun with episode 14, because I was getting a bit sick of doing this over and over. So usually it's roughly once a month or so, as it needs to be for these things to come out. And then I spend the rest of that month after recording it, firstly editing all the lines, putting stuff together, and then ultimately compiling and making all the slides, animations of my sort of my glorious PowerPoint presentation that is the Wollen Retold series. Because I can't animate, and this stuff would take an ungodly longer amount of time if it takes me a month to do it without animation. Let's not even discuss how long it would have taken otherwise. Oh, you don't even want to think about that. Point being, right, I'm just all over the place. I apologise, people. I hope for your sake you skipped to this point and did not have to just be everything I've been complaining about. I was having a great time. It was good. It was wonderful. The opposite of how I'm feeling right now, thinking about all my mistakes I've made in hindsight, basically, where I was just going to be all up and fun, and, I had to make sure I dialed that back down after the intro as much as I could for session 14, but it was a lot nicer to kind of just be more, lively and silly and just kind of funny about it. I wasn't trying to kind of be more consistent with my monotone voice. So if you ever rewatch in future and you think, what, compared to all the rest, it's a bit jarring when you start episode 14 of Wollen Retold and like it's just like whoa, so much energy. This guy's just coming out of the bathroom like having done like a whole fucking brick of cocaine. That's why. It's just I desperately needed to kind of like get out of that repetitive ongoing cycle that I was in, and I took 10 minutes to explain that. I'm so sorry to everyone. I spent most of the time just complaining. I'm going to move on now because we do not need to repeat last time and make this episode extremely long. I did such a great job of doing that by complaining for 10 minutes. Dear me, fighting the urge not to cut this all out. I don't have a good reason not to. But I'm probably going to leave it in because I don't know. At this point, I just need someone to suffer with me. Right, let's move on. For the reason you came here, first thing, episode 14, the Scrying Network under the cliff in Labrie, above the sort of the upper city. Turns out, Labrie's people, Cyrus Greenhill, the Viscount of the city, spying on everyone. Wonderful. I think everyone universally loves 24/7 surveillance. So that's fun. Of course, most residents are at least somewhat aware of this fact. It's like an open secret. Maybe not even that, depending on how much they actually get to arrest and like prosecute people because they are constantly watching what's going on. And that would have been a drastic thing that would have affected the campaign greatly if the players had spent more time in Labrie experiencing that by being there and going through the whole nature of being in a place where, it was the opposite of your sort of cliche ragtag movie place you visit where like it's lawless, the Wild West, there's no real rules, they govern themselves, and there's like people shooting and stabbing each other. You've seen that a million times in movies if you watch, like at least 10 of them. That's like super cliche, and Labrie was going to be the exact opposite. Which again, it's probably a cliche in itself. It's like an overly strict and extremely I'm trying to find a word for it, but they've all got things up their bums, basically. They've all got to stick up their ass. That sort of mentality, right? Crude, I know, and I apologise, but it gets the point across as effectively as I want. Labrie is a place for people that, I guess, do like fun, but they have a horrible, horrible way of defining it. As everyone is constantly surveilled, everyone is given like lots of fines at all times of things. There's not really even a lower class, so to speak, in the city. It's mostly middle and upper. You can't be at least comfortably wealthy, or at least decently well off, and be able to actually live inside the walls of the city. And that's shitty, but that's Labrie for you. And it would have been very interesting to have, that you can see the juxtaposition. We've got Bristol, the sort of the brutes, the hard asses. They don't really have like a essence of politics. They mostly want to get off their work and do their thing, and they don't like magic. That's more or less what they are, and thus it was a nice introduction city. Not that I actually chose that, the players did, but it was a nice funny coincidence. And then you have on either side Dale, which we're very familiar with a very crime-ridden, very divided, very messy city. Very complicated, a lot of crime going on. Which, the players know better than just about anyone. And the Labrie, on the very other end of the entire place, the actual capital city, currently in the lore of the world, was the complete opposite. A much more, it's in every way what Dale isn't. It is extremely upstanding, it's very clean and polished, everything is very nice, on the surface to the public, behind closed doors, who can imagine. But even behind closed doors, it is not really a safe refuge for those who would seek privacy or the ability to commit any sort of criminal offence or activity. Because it just comes down to the fact that this entire city is like heavily surveillanced, and it is it would have made such an interesting opportunity. I do imagine, had they decided to spend more of their time in the Sandbox Open World campaign to go to Labrie, which they could have done at any time, it could have become much more, as very likely, let's be honest. We probably all know D&D parties and what they're like. The chances of them not committing at least minor felonies or petty little theft or crime or something along the way and getting caught for it in Labrie is almost next to none. But totally would have happened. And had they happened, they would have got arrested, probably taken to prison, and then they could have had like a whole prison escape trying to free other individuals, maybe some different crime lords from Doris who they may have found there, and that could have had a huge influence on the rest of the plot. Again, it could have been an entirely different campaign. They just did one thing differently. I love the butterfly effect, and I think I've discussed this before, and that was so ultimately what it came down to was just the fact they chose Dale instead of Labrie made a huge difference in like where they decided to travel at the start of the campaign, like in the first early episodes, and that drastically could have made two entirely different stories. Love that. It's such a cool thing to think about. Anyway, with that being said, when these players actually got into the scrying circle to go report, hey, Doris is planning to, attack Labrie, and that's like a whole thing that you should probably deal with, because that's, the two biggest, most major cities and biggest sources of, forces, militia, and people, and power, that are going to collide heads, could affect the entire Wollen, especially because the distance between them spans the entire island of Wollen. So this is like a code black, code red, whichever one's like the really bad one. Code brown, in case someone needs to change their pants, I don't know. And it is quite fun to have that happen for the players who immediately get reminded, oh, that's right, we know we're the main characters, but no one else knows, so because we are, in theory, a little more than sort of like info givers, more than, scouts to these bigger leaders, they kind of dismiss us immediately upon we give them actual evidence to follow this lead on, and they just go, we'll take care of it, because why would we need you random low-level schmucks? And they don't have a good argument as to why they're necessary, so they just kind of, just going to bugger off, yeah, fair enough. But before they leave, we get to see the fun part of the most fleshed out character to date, as time of recording, in Wollen, I should clarify, because I realise that's not technically true. As far as you guys have seen, the best and most fleshed out character, I can't say best, because a lot of people will probably really like Zook. But Zach, who is currently playing Carrick, who had played Zook and then Palin beforehand. Carrick is, as I've gushed about this many times before, is the best way he kind of enveloped the complexity and the depth to a character that he made with Carrick. Really like what Zach did with him. And Carrick served as a very, very awesome driving force for leading the party throughout the rest of this whole this situation, as we've already seen. And this is where we get to see his family, his backstory that he already made when he made this character. And I want to be very clear, it was him who came to me. Zach came to me outside the game and said, Ben, for this next character, I would like to have a ex-wife who we divorced badly. It's not good. And I was like, okay, great, I'm immediately on board with this. This is extremely fun as an idea, because it's not often you get that sort of pitch. So miserably divorced couple that are definitely not on good terms and are so antagonistic towards each other that on sight they all start being like rabid dogs and barking and foaming at the mouth trying to get at each other. Bloody hilarious. Love that. It's very fun. And because it's so over the top, it doesn't become a really depressing story of two people who once loved each other very much, which is technically what it was, and then it had an ugly divorce, and it was a whole miserable thing. That could be a really depressing plot point. And I would not be against the idea of role-playing with something like that in the future. But, in this case, it's so ridiculous, and it's such an extreme thing, that it just comes across more as funny, which is nice, because it's the, ideally, when faced with tragedy, you want to find a way to laugh, not sit with it and have it make you kind of reflect on the horrible tragedy of pain that you can really suffer in the real world, that, anyone could fall victim to a very nasty divorce had things gone a particular way. Anyway, I'm doing a very bad job of trying to avoid the depressing part of that topic, so moving on from that, they also have kids, and we got to see one of them who very much is a mama's boy and took his mother's side during that whole divorce, which only, again, if we don't laugh about it, we would cry, because it is such a painful thing in real life, but in this fictional setting, and as a player, Zach, who wanted this, asked for this, and thought this would be fun, and to make it as extreme and silly and ridiculous over the top as it is, it's a funny, light-hearted-esque, silly shenanigan situation. Very fun to play. Not much more to say about that at the time being, but maybe we see more of the family in the future. So once they get kind of kicked down and said, hey, thanks for the information, bye-bye, you're not useful to us, because we're the big, powerful, high-level NPCs who can actually do things, and you're just random people. Once that happens to them, obviously, like, they have to kick some rocks, like, god damn it, what the hell? Getting told to leave as the main characters in the story, which, actually, when you think about it, just about every major story usually has the main character be kind of, underestimated or dismissed by the actual people in charge that could help. But at least in this case, in my endeavour, I'm not going as cliche as that, because in my situation, these actual NPCs that are kind of taking charge instead of listening to the main characters have at least taken the information the main characters have given them and are actually using it. They in theory, could go stop the issue without them. And there's definitely two ways of looking at that, where that could potentially be seen as a bad thing for a DM to do. Like, hey, I've made this thing that I have NPCs that are better equipped to deal with than the players. But you can't have a realistic world. A fun world to be in my opinion, is one that you don't feel like the main character all the time. I know it's One Piece is great. I love One Piece. I'm not going to start going the whole thing about it, I promise. I digress enough. But One Piece does a very good job of being like, hey, here's the main characters. They're very strong, impressive, cool, and we like them. We're going to follow them around. Also, even though they're this great and this strong and everything, these main characters are absolutely nowhere near close to the most powerful people in the show. And we will have multiple occasions where our main characters will stumble into, by accident, one of these really powerful people, and our wonderful main characters that can like fall on like one hit KO like a goddamn giant sea beast 5-10 times the size of their own ship. Even the main characters, will flee in fear and try to escape desperately from these more powerful individuals they have no chance of even trying to fight. That's cool. I like that. I don't want to overdo it when I do my campaigns, but I like to have characters that are bigger and badder, so that way, especially early level, we somewhat discourage, and this is kind of, you see this is started with like Doris and Zook. You want to make sure your players don't feel too comfortable too early doing some pretty heinous or extreme shit, thinking that they can just get away with it because they've got plot armor. And then you have to teach them, no you don't, and there's a whole bunch of people around there who are much stronger than you in this world. They'll be very happy to prove that point to you. So fun times. Anyway, going past that point, when these big powerful people kick them out, it's like, alright, go do something else, because we don't need you right now. The players get to kind of have what ironically ends up being a much more lighthearted and fun experience leading up to the actual point in the finale in the next episode, will be the last one, where all the big things happen, everything like comes together as a head, and all the sort of stuff is going to happen. It's going to be great. No spoilers, of course, in case you're listening to this before that comes out. But ultimately, this does serve as a fun, lighthearted last chance to kind of just chill out and kind of hang out as a group and kind of enjoy sort of the old days, the old, every saying of every TV show that's ever existed is like, season 1, a simpler time. This is like the last chance they get to feel like things are normal and okay and fun and lighthearted again, because everything that comes afterwards is going to have some severe repercussions, extreme things, and who knows, maybe some people we care about are about to die. So, hence the title for these last 2 episodes. I guess minor spoiler if you don't want to know the title for the next episode of the finale, but they tie in nicely with episode 1 and 2 at the start of this campaign. As episode 1 is a rat walks into a bar, into a tavern, and then 2 and finds more rats for episode 2. And they, if you read them together, they tie into one big sentence, like a setup and a punchline. That has a lot of double meanings and cool context when you actually watch the episode and appreciate it. And in this case, it's maybe not as many double meanings, but it is neat that there is, just as we started the episode with 1 and 2, we end the episode with second to last and the last episode by having them once again be 2 titles that stand on their own and together ultimately make a bigger point, which is that this episode, of course, is called The Storm. Sorry, wrong. My bad, that's the 15th episode. This is The Calm Before. Episode 14, The Calm Before. And then episode 15, the finale, is The Storm. And I don't need to explain that. That's pretty obvious what that implies. But yeah, this gets to be the part where we get to see these guys go and hang out at Trussell, visit the last final location of at least bullet point on a map they're aware of in Wollen, where they've technically now explored the whole thing. At least Nadar has, because he's the only actual person at the table who's also got a player who's travelled everywhere and not died, so good for him, Nadar, Cade. And then there is, they get to basically have a little bit of magical drugs with a bunch of druids. Good time, bloody funny. It's just lighthearted and nice. Again, this is not something I designed for like the second to last episode. They could have gone to Trust at any time and realised these guys were way more laid back and they were just, as the kids would say, chill like that. But as it turns out, they get to have this fun and it's just nice. Kind of gets interrupted when they come across, a dragon that then sets up not the most surprising spoiler. It's not a spoiler now, because if you listen to this, you would have watched episode 14, it'd already be out. So therefore, how many people, raise their hands, I can't see them, so go ahead. How many people caught on that Tywin is Nadar's father? Yeah, not the biggest surprise, not something I was trying to hide that well. At times I was just being openly cheeky about it. But if you were actually caught off guard, you didn't see that coming, and that did surprise you, awesome, that's cool. I'm glad that could be a fun surprise for you. Now that said, there is, it's worth kind of just painting a light of how that kind of played out. Cade, who played Nadar, both him and his character were not aware that Tywin was his father. He knew his father was a bard, the whole thing, but he didn't get told that I had allowed Jacob to play his dad who had come back from the dead. And, you can have two minds about how you feel about that. I can see some people like having some issues with that idea, but it worked out well in the sense that it did, because we had established the very basic idea of who Cade/Nadar's father was in this world, because he was not that worried about it. He had his mum, that was kind of his bigger thing. Really was not nearly as much of a concern to remember who his dad was, because in his timeline he already realised his dad was already dead from long ago. He didn't grow up with his dad in his life. Which sounds depressing until you realise, when you know who his dad is, maybe that actually improved his childhood. No offence to Tywin. Tywin, I established for him. I chose the name Tywin. When we were doing this backstory, I kind of fed him the details about his dad, because he just wanted, nice and simple, his dad was not important to him. So it was just, the cliche, horny bard seduces the dragon. And in this particular case, because he's kind of a hilarious fuck-up, that's Tywin's whole thing. I can say that because I made his character. He forgot to do, one or two crucial steps, or maybe he didn't forget, he intentionally chose not to do certain crucial steps to avoid being killed when you try to seduce a dragon, and you succeed. Oh boy, good for him. What a way to go, eh? He did have the, I fleshed him out, I knew who he was, I knew his whole thing, and I did not have any intention for him to ever come back. Nothing's stopping him, I just, why would you? And then Jacob comes up to me when he's got Doppelganger Dane he's playing as, and he's well at some point sooner or later his players are going to figure out that he's a doppelganger and that real Dane is dead and he's going to need a new character. So he comes to me with a cheeky look on his face. This is shortly after he realises that Cade's whole backstory thing, and he goes, "Hey, Ben, for my next character, do you think I could potentially play a bard?" I was like, absolutely, we haven't had one. That'd be great. He goes, great, fantastic. On that note, Ben, could we play, Nadar's dad? And he did this in private, of course. No, none of the other players were aware of this. Cade didn't hear about this. I thought that was bloody funny. I did briefly hesitate. I considered it, because immediately wanted to say yes, but I was like, no, hang on, this is Cade's character. This is this thing I should run by him, that sort of stuff, and I kind of thought it over. I figured that Cade would probably love it. The whole thing that Jacob wanted to do as Cade's friend was, be a fun surprise for him, and it'd be like a cool roleplay moment. So I was like, yeah, you know what, let's go ahead with it. If it was a bigger, major character, it was actually a part of Nadar's requested story, instead of what was basically an afterthought to Cade as a person, as a player, then I might have thought, differently about it. But in this element, in this nature, I thought, no, this is a cool way to do it. He won't really mind. If anything, he'll enjoy the fun, and there's not a good chance that he's going to be bothered by it. So I went ahead and said, yep, we can do this. It'll be a fun little surprise. And I also had to, briefly, concerned myself with the fact that this was technically, because I couldn't help myself, I just do this. When I make an NPC, even though it's supposed to be minor, I can't help putting in some just little details and tidbits and get an idea of like who they were, because in case it ever comes back, I want to like kind of reflect that this is a built-in world. If someone exists, they exist. It doesn't end at like their name, whether they're on screen or not. They have lives, previous things. Most of the NPCs you meet, that you'll never ask or never learn this information, but it's always there in case you have a way to do so. They Just because they might be like this village blacksmith that you meet now, doesn't mean they always were. Maybe in the old days they used to, cut here and then realize it wasn't for them. And that would be like a part I put into the NPC, which again, was almost never brought up. But I like to have those little details, just that way if your players all of a sudden take it to curiosity and want more complexity, it's fun to already have an idea that potentially, in very subtle ways, you could have foreshadowed ahead of time, to imply this sort of stuff, which is, a lot of fun. So Tywin being an NPC that I had a decent amount of stuff on, like his personality that you see in game, everything else is very much a reflection of the character I was creating for him to be like, especially in his first introduction, where he's just kind of almost sort of cloud on his head's idiot, sort of naive, just simpleton who's got a huge ego. That does boil down a lot of his character, and so I was not entirely convinced I liked the idea of having a player come in and take over a established NPC. Though I suppose the word established can be considered loosely, because they technically haven't met him, and, what I had in my head doesn't necessarily need to correlate what actually becomes of him. And so I was like, well, again, this is the first campaign. This is the place where I test all the things that I'm not sure work or not. So I gave it to him and said, yeah, go ahead, give it a go. I want to see how this works out for you. I gave him the brief rundown of what he was like and what he's, this sort of thing. And then let Jacob just kind of figure out the rest and fill in the gaps. And he did. And I can say that was a very successful decision I made when I came to, can I trust a player to take on an NPC, and how will that work, and will I like that, and will it work out overall best, or will it be too limiting and restricting on them and kind of ruin things that I intended for that character? Nope, Jacob did great. It was a lot of fun, and overall I think it was a very cool idea. Nothing but thumbs up for Jacob, honestly. I was very, very, very pleased with Tywin. I thought it was great to watch him go from being a more stoic, more serious, the barbarian, almost designated party leader, Dane, and then he got to switch up and play a role that, on paper, if you didn't know the players behind them, you would expect the same guy who played Zook and Palin, Zach, you'd expect him to be the guy who was actually playing Tywin, the silly bard, the comic relief, as Palin kind of was that as well. And then you'd expect the new takeover party leader, Carrick, to be played by the previous party leader sort of person, Dane. But no, they switched roles, they're completely reversed, and they both did such a great job at being on other sides of the fence. Jacob made a great comic relief fun character, just a bit of a rascal. You had to kind of pull in, so he'd stop feeling like all the married women in their homes. He's just a little bit of a harmless but silly boy. He's a bit of a silly goose. And then we got to have, Zach stepping up to take a more serious role and play sort of more of the driving force. I guess in some way he kind of was it with Zook, but, a positive driving force with Carrick as a new kind of leader, kind of deciding where they go and talking when no one else will, when everyone is indecisive. Otherwise, most times they still act as generally in democracy. So that was very fun to kind of see that play out. Nothing more to explore than that, really. Is the fun stuff like Nadine's mother, obviously hooking up a dragon, but it's just what it is. The kobolds were a fun thing to have. Always love to have kobolds back. I love playing stupid kobolds because in my idea of the lore, they're all basically based off Chris Perkins' character Spirit from a very, very brief cameo-ish guest character in the second campaign of Critical Role. I realised in the real lore that, of course, kobolds are supposed to be cunning and tricky, and they can be very, clever in their own way while still being kind of dumb. And in my world, I just love the idea that every kobold is just a miracle in of itself that they have made it this far as a species, because they just have no brains whatsoever, and I love role-playing them. So having that kobolds get to come back again and kind of have an invitation to be a part of the finale next episode was mwah, chef's kiss. So happy that that's a possible thing that was left open from the players to be able to do. And yes, well aware that I'm once again pushing the time here, and I don't want to keep going any longer than this. I think I have covered every point I want to, and hopefully I've given you a general rundown of stuff. Sorry for spending the first 10 minutes of this episode just complaining. Obviously, talking about the parts of this that I like, the actual story and the episode and all that, has put me in better spirits. So, thank you for coming with me on my little character arc back to a point of happiness from the worst aspects of this job to the best parts. And with that, on that happier note, I will see you next time for the recap, the final behind the sessions, because the epilogue does not need one, as we look behind the scenes of the finale. And hopefully you'll look forward to that one. See you then. Bye-bye.